You think your biggest threat wears a mask of hatred, but often, the dagger comes not from your enemies. It comes from the hands you trust the most. Today, we expose the truth that few dare to admit. A ruler who confuses affection with allegiance prepares his own ruin. Examine the history of thrones toppled and enterprises devoured. The carcass is always picked apart first by those who once vowed undying devotion. The lesson is simple but merciless. People remain loyal only while loyalty serves their self-interest. Today they chant your name because your banner offers profit or protection. Tomorrow, at the faintest tremor of risk, they will barter that allegiance to anyone who promises a safer harbor. Sentiment blinds the unseasoned leader to this market of shifting commitments. He invests in hearts rather than leverage and wakes to discover that hearts are leased, never owned. To understand conditional loyalty, strip away the comforting myths we tell children about friendship or blood. Kinship does not grant immunity from ambition. Marriage does not erase the instinct for survival. Camaraderie dissolves the instant scarcity intrudes. The cousin who shares your table dreams of his own ascent. The spouse who whispers comfort tonight will measure you against opportunity tomorrow. This reality is not a flaw in humanity. It is the engine of human progress, the force that drives alliances, marriages, and treaties. You are safer when you regard every relationship as a transaction whose terms must be renegotiated whenever the balance of power changes. How does one live in perpetual negotiation without succumbing to paranoia? By constructing incentives so firm that betrayal costs more than fidelity. Compartmentalize authority so no single confidant holds both the knife and the map to your vulnerable anatomy. Reward quickly, punish without hesitation, and let both reward and punishment ripple outward as legend. If betrayal appears profitable, you have failed to price it correctly. Increase the cost by tying your allies' fortunes to your own inextricable knots of debt, prestige, and fear. A minister who controls tax revenues but not military support will hesitate before defecting, knowing finance is nothing without force. A partner whose family thrives under your patronage will measure the risk of betrayal against the starvation of his children. Chains forged from necessity are stronger than chains forged from affection. Do not imagine that displays of warmth will discourage treachery. On the contrary, warmth lulls you into lowering defenses, while advertising precisely which sentimental strings can be plucked. The emissary smiling across the banquet table takes note of the names that make your eyes soften. He records each anecdote revealing your regrets. Those anecdotes become weapons in a rebellion you never saw forming, because you mistook conviviality for covenant. Maintain courtesy. Yes, courtesy is a lubricant that keeps the gears of power turning smoothly, but keep your internal temperature below freezing. Courtesy is theatrical, loyalty is mathematical. Observe also the paradox of gratitude. Beneficiaries of your favor often turn resentful, not devoted, once their bellies are full. The very hand that feeds becomes a reminder of weakness endured, a mirror reflecting their dependency. To preserve face, they must one day reject the hand or bite it clean off. Therefore, when you bestow favors, do so in measured doses that keep recipients aspiring rather than satiated. A hungry ally depends on you. A stuffed ally renegotiates the menu. When conditional loyalty begins to wobble, do not cling to it like a drowning sailor embracing ballast. People sense desperation and interpret it as weakness. Instead, pivot to new alliances. Recruit fresh adherents hungry for the patronage your defectors now undervalue. Make defection appear foolish by flourishing despite it. Nothing smothers a rebellion faster than the sight of the realm prospering under the very ruler the rebels declared finished. Success is proof, and proof silences doubts better than any oath. Understand that your own loyalty, too, must be conditional. You owe nothing to servants who can no longer serve, generals who can no longer fight, or lovers who endanger the state. Sentiment toward them is a luxury item, affordable only after the ledger of advantage balances in your favor. Delay the severing blow out of nostalgia, and you invite disease into the bloodstream of power. Perform the excision swiftly, publicly, and with a rationale that others can calculate. He was removed because his negligence jeopardized the whole. By framing your ruthlessness as the vigilant maintenance of collective stability, you convert fear into grudging respect. The sharpest rulers cultivate a reputation for unforgiving memory, but equitable treatment. Allies must believe that betrayal will never be forgotten, yet service will always be recognized. This duality keeps them orbiting within your gravitational field, uncertain whether the next flare they witness will be the blaze of your generosity or the scorching fire of your retribution. In that uncertainty lies control. Control is not achieved by chaining every subject to the dungeon wall. It is achieved by chaining every subject to the logic of consequence, calculus they mentally recalculate before each decision that might harm you. Finally, do not broadcast these mechanics. Let the court whisper about your unwavering resolve, but never confess the formula by which you calculate reward and punishment. Mystery magnifies deterrence. When people cannot predict precisely how you will retaliate, they inflate the dangers in their imagination, often beyond what you yourself could have devised. Their fear engineers your dominance. The tender chord of feeling is prized most highly by those who cannot dominate through merit. Observe a beggar outside a palace gate. He has no sword, no title, no army, yet he may still compel the Lord within to loosen the treasury. By displaying misery with theatrical precision, his weapon is the discomfort the ruler feels when confronted with suffering. Magnify that scene across councils, families, and empires, and the pattern becomes undeniable. Those lowest on the rung study sentiment the way generals study terrain, mapping every tremor in a superior's voice, every flicker across a superior's eyes, until they possess a blueprint for silent attack. When force is out of reach, the weak discover that the quickest road to power is not to seize your fortress, but to occupy your heart. Consider the confidant who arrives late in the evening, eyes moist, voice trembling. She recounts some distress, an insult inflicted by a rival, a financial crisis, a threat to her reputation, and she frames it so that your sympathy becomes both comfort and obligation. By sharing her pain, you inherit it. That inheritance is not a gift, it is a hook. Tomorrow, when she requests a promotion, she will remind you, explicitly or by posture, of the night you wiped her tears. The appeal will not rest on competence but on reciprocity, on your need to prove that your earlier compassion was genuine. Should you refuse, she will interpret the refusal as betrayal, transforming her weakness into moral superiority, making you the villain who abandons the afflicted. In this way, tears metamorphose into handcuffs, forged from the steel of your own need to appear benevolent. Witness also how the weak excel at guiltcraft. Guilt, unlike fear, is self-inflicted. It requires the target to believe he has wronged someone. The powerless insinuate such belief gently, cloaking accusation in compliments, letting you conclude on your own that you owe them greater kindness. Years later, you discover you have structured entire institutions, reshaped policy, or endowed trust funds chiefly to absolve yourself of wounds that may never have existed. Meanwhile, your beneficiary has moved from weakness to comfort, from comfort to influence, all by manipulating your conscience as if it were a marionette on invisible strings. Emotional manipulation thrives in negotiation rooms. A partner feigns reluctance to sign until you meet impossible terms, lamenting how his children or loyal staff will suffer if the deal collapses. The pity he evokes distracts you from the balance sheet. Numbers blur when faces enter the calculation, and by the time clarity returns, you have traded profit for a story that tugs the heart. The true cost surfaces months later on financial statements dripping red. But by then, the manipulator has secured his advantage, citing your earlier agreement as incontrovertible proof of fairness. Children learn this craft before they master language. A toddler senses that a well-timed scream cracks parental discipline. Subordinates retain that instinct into adulthood, but refine it with vocabulary and etiquette. Their tantrum becomes a carefully worded memo describing burnout. Their tears become a silent withdrawal from effort. Their screams become passive, aggressive compliance. The common thread is the transference of discomfort. Your desire for harmony outweighs their obligation to perform. By controlling your peace of mind, they dictate your behavior. Even praise can be weaponized. Flattery disarms faster than any sob. A subordinate showers you with admiration precisely when criticism would help him more. The goal is not your improvement, it is your relaxation. You drop your guard around those who celebrate you, believing them allies, and they slip deeper into your confidence. Once inside, they influence decisions that shape fates far beyond their own. The amplitude of their praise corresponds not to the depth of their loyalty, but to the magnitude of what they aim to extract. To defend against exploitation, detach the evaluation of a request from the emotional state of the requester. Picture a wall of glass between their expression and your judgment. You may observe the contortions of their face, hear the tremor in their voice, yet your calculations occur behind the pain, untouched by drafts of sentiment. Train your advisors to adopt the same discipline. For if one chamber in your governance leaks sympathy uncontrollably, the entire structure floods. Cultivate a persona that registers emotion lightly and rewards logic heavily. Let the court discover that tears dry faster in your presence because they yield no benefit. Over time, the performers will seek stages elsewhere, and only matters of substance will reach your ears. This is not cruelty. It is filtration, preserving your energy for challenges that demand intellect rather than indulgence. When authentic tragedy does appear, and it will, you will be capable of measured assistance, unmuddied by the imposters who once consumed your resources. A strategic leader may still deploy emotion intentionally, but treats it as costume, not skin. Display indignation to motivate an army, compassion to soothe the populace after crisis, jubilation to celebrate a victory that requires popular unity. Yet beneath each display lies steady indifference, the still water that reflects every face yet swallows none. If actors on the lower tiers attempt to commandeer the script with their own sentimental improvisations, the leader restores order by ignoring the performance until the audience loses interest. Power does not survive in the arms of familiarity. The ruler who permits too much closeness, who blurs the line between sovereign and subject, loses the mystery that sustains authority. Influence is not maintained by being liked, but by being untouchable. When those beneath you begin to speak your name without fear, laugh in your presence without restraint, or enter your chambers without formality, they forget what separates them from you. That forgetfulness breeds contempt, and from contempt, rebellion grows. The man they joked with yesterday is the man they conspire against today. You cannot lead those who see you as one of them. Leadership requires altitude. There is a natural human instinct to grow intimate with those around us. We crave connection, affirmation, the illusion of safety in others. But rulers are not granted that luxury. A commander who eats at the same table, shares the same wine, and confides in his men becomes one of them, and one of them is never feared. Without fear, orders become requests. Without distance, commands are filtered through the lens of opinion. What began as shared trust ends in compromised control. True dominance is not sustained through brute force alone. It is maintained through perception. You must be seen as elevated, removed, beyond reach. The subject should speculate on your thoughts, but never hear them freely. Your advisors should witness your decisions, but rarely glimpse the indecision behind them. That separation is not a barrier, it is a throne. The higher you are, the harder it is for them to measure your weaknesses, and the more powerful your image becomes. Even the strongest ruler has flaws. Distance ensures they remain rumors, not realities. The illusion of equality is the gateway to insubordination. When a subordinate begins to believe that his voice holds equal weight to yours, he ceases to follow, he negotiates. He no longer obeys out of duty, but evaluates whether obedience aligns with his own sense of justice. You are no longer the axis around which the state turns. You are merely a voice among others, and leadership diluted is leadership destroyed. The wise ruler must create an atmosphere where silence precedes his arrival and reverence follows his departure. Proximity must never be mistaken for parity. This does not mean isolation in the literal sense. You will dine with allies, walk among the people, offer words to the court. But all of this is theater. Behind the curtain, your real decisions, your real motives, remain unspoken. Let them see only what you want them to believe. When they think they know you, change the script. When they predict your move, take a different path. Predictability breeds familiarity, and familiarity breeds irreverence. Mystery enforces distance. A ruler without mystery is no ruler at all. He is an administrator. There is also danger in affection. Once your inner circle feels emotionally close to you, their expectations shift. They no longer view themselves as servants to your power, but as stakeholders entitled to influence. The courtier who once feared losing your favor now dares to challenge you in private, appealing not to reason but to your shared bond. He mistakes his years of service for a license to argue. He leans in during conversations. He interrupts. He counsels not with deference but with entitlement. What began as loyalty has become presumption, and from presumption comes insolence. To correct this error, you must reassert distance, not through lectures, through exclusion. Deny access, reduce visibility. Allow them to feel your absence, and in that absence, they will rediscover respect. Observe the enduring power of monarchs who speak seldom, appear rarely, and punish swiftly. Their distance is not a flaw but a feature. The masses project onto them all things divine or dreadful, because they are unknown. An unknown ruler becomes a legend. A familiar ruler becomes a man. Between these two figures, only the legend inspires obedience without question. The man inspires debate, and debate corrodes authority. Distance also creates dependency. The closer someone is to your daily routines, the more they believe they can survive without you. When you withhold your presence and speak through intermediaries, every instruction feels like a blessing, every appearance a privilege. This enforces a hierarchy not just of rank, but of presence. Your scarcity increases your value. People do not treasure what is always available. They treasure what must be earned, what appears rarely, what commands attention by mere presence. When you walk into a room, heads should turn not from routine but from awe. Establishing dominance through distance does not require cruelty. It requires control of access. Decide who sees you and when, who hears your true thoughts and under what terms. Do not mistake transparency for strength. Transparency dilutes power. A leader who reveals everything is no longer in control. He is in need of approval. Control the narrative, filter the image, and maintain a veil through which others must strain to glimpse your mind. The harder they have to look, the more they will revere what they think they see. An empire is less a monument of marble than a sequence of critical moments when its ruler chose severity over sentiment. What endures is not the warmth of his heart, but the precision of his judgment. The ruler who hesitates at the brink of ruthlessness confuses the temporary comfort of mercy with the permanent security of order. Mercy is praised in songs, yet it expands like a crack in stone, invisible at first, widening under the weight of time until the entire structure collapses. Cold decisions, by contrast, cauterize the wound before infection spreads. The pain is immediate, the scar visible, but the body politic survives to fight another war, endure another drought, repulse another usurper. Stability demands that the sovereign regard every choice as a wager on the future of the realm, not as a referendum on his compassion. When famine threatens, he must ration grain without regard to which district weeps loudest. When treachery stirs, he must excise the conspirator though the traitor's children kneel at his feet. To delay for pity's sake is to allow chaos an interval to grow teeth. By the time the hesitant ruler lifts his sword, the beast of disorder has already sunk its jaws into his treasury, his army's morale, his legitimacy. Swift coldness is not cruelty, it is prophylaxis, the disciplined strike that prevents an epidemic of defiance. Observe how rivers are tamed. An engineer diverts the flow with concrete, not gentle persuasion. The water does not negotiate, it obeys the hardness of the channel. A realm is no different. Populations surge toward vice, faction, or laziness if permitted. The ruler's task is to pour the concrete of law, to shape behavior with unmistakable edges. When punishment is consistent and immediate, the subjects learn to navigate within safe banks. They may grumble at constraints, but they flourish in the predictable calm that follows. Children can grow, merchants can plan, soldiers can train, because the ruler refused to let sentiment erode the levees of order. Cold decisions also clarify hierarchy. In moments of uncertainty, the population searches for signs: who commands, who submits, who answers to whom. A decisive act of severity illuminates the chain of authority like a lightning strike over a dark plain. Doubt dissipates, positions become visible. Even those who resent the ruler's harshness often breathe easier once they know exactly where power resides. Ambition recalibrates itself, and stability follows because every player can calculate risk within a consistent framework, enforced by a leader who demonstrates the will to act. Consider succession. Nothing sows instability faster than a contest for the throne conducted under the guise of familial affection. Fathers delude themselves that they shall live long enough to avoid choosing among rival heirs. Brothers imagine that blood will temper rivalry. Advisors counsel patience until the family works it out. Meanwhile, factions sharpen daggers under the table. The ruler who truly loves his dynasty does not postpone the inevitable. He selects a successor publicly, arms him with authority, and banishes challengers to distant frontiers. Such severity spares the realm decades of civil war. The axe that falls swiftly on one prince preserves 1,000 villages from slaughter. Some argue that fear is brittle, that a regime built on terror shatters when a braver enemy appears. They mistake coldness for terror. Terror is random, theatrical, often excessive. It breeds desperation, not obedience. Cold decisions differ. They are targeted, proportionate, and justified by transparent logic. Citizens internalize the rationale. They may dislike the outcome, but they concede its necessity. Over time, this cultivates respect deeper than affection, because it is respect built on confidence that the ruler will always choose the realm over personal feeling. Trust in his ruthlessness becomes an anchor of stability. People know what to expect from a sovereign who never flinches when the knife must descend. Economic policy benefits equally from cold clarity. Subsidize failing guilds out of nostalgia, and you bleed the treasury for sentiment's sake. Let bankruptcy claim the unproductive. Reallocate resources to enterprises that generate real wealth, and the market flourishes. The workers displaced in the moment curse your name, but the prosperity that follows absorbs them into stronger industries. Pity would have preserved their familiar misery. Severity transitions them to future prosperity. The ruler responsible for the harsh pivot now presides over a robust economy, proof that coldness produces dividends warmer hearts cannot imagine. Foreign affairs demand the same discipline. Treaties forged from brotherhood between kings crumble when circumstances shift. Alliances grounded in calculation endure. Sign no pact merely to avoid the discomfort of conflict. War postponed for sentiment often erupts later at greater cost. If a neighboring duke grows ambitious, crush him before he consolidates allies, regardless of the feast you once shared in his hall. Such preemptive strikes reduce suffering overall by preventing regional conflagrations. History remembers the swift conqueror as a bringer of peace precisely because his brutal decisiveness curtailed a far bloodier future. Within the court, cold judgment deeters intrigue. Let a first offender walk free out of magnanimity, and every ambitious courtier deduces that he too will receive a second chance. Let the scaffold rise the day transgression is proven, and future plotters will pause before staking their heads on treason. The spectacle of certain consequence stabilizes the palace more effectively than 1,000 sermons on loyalty. Even loyal ministers should feel a chill in the throne room. That chill steels their resolve to guard, not game, the sovereign's trust. Finally, remember that the ruler's coldness must be directed outward as well as inward. He must apply the blade to his own impulses, severing pride, nostalgia, pettiness, any emotion that clouds strategic vision. The hardest discipline is self-discipline. The sovereign who masters his desires masters the state, for personal caprice is the subtlest saboteur of stability. A banquet postponed, a mistress dismissed, a grievance ignored. Each private sacrifice fortifies public order. When subjects witness a leader who denies himself indulgence, they believe that his harsh decrees arise not from cruelty, but from a higher allegiance to the realm, and thus they accept, and even defend, the austerity he imposes on them. You are not called to rule for the sake of comfort, nor to lead in the warmth of approval. You are called to endure the weight of sovereignty, which demands decisions others fear to make. The world is not held together by love alone. It is held together by structure, discipline, and the rare few willing to embrace necessity over sentiment. The weak appeal to your heart because they cannot challenge your mind. Familiarity dissolves fear, and fearlessness breeds insubordination. Those closest to you will test your boundaries first, masking entitlement as affection. Your compassion, if unguarded, will be transformed into currency to be traded and spent against your authority. You must see this pattern not as cynicism, but as clarity. True leadership demands distance, decisiveness, and detachment. You must remain above, removed from the turbulence of their feelings, unshaken by their pleas. Only then can you see the entire board, where the next threat lurks, where loyalty falters, where silence must be broken by action. Cold decisions cut swiftly, their pain is brief. In their wake lies stability, the kind that endures beyond your lifetime. The one who rules with a warm hand is celebrated in the moment. The one who rules with a cold mind is remembered in history. Choose which legacy you prefer.